Let's start with Dallas, and they're tying the series against Phoenix tonight. I told you guys that I predicted this series to go to 6 games, mainly because I trusted Luka to be able to overcome the massive talent disadvantage between these two teams, just with the way that he can control a basketball game and his ability to control the pace and the flow with his consistent good decision making. And ironically enough, he's still not shooting the ball particularly well. That's going to be the thing that's going to be really freaky for the Suns in terms of the threat. The appropriate fear that they should have that they can lose this series should come from the fact that Luka once again tonight had 26 points on 25 shots, was not efficient, was missing that step back three that he goes to. He's been hitting that in his playoff career over 40%. Our guy Carson pointed that out on TikTok the other day. He was 1 for 10 tonight. And there's a version of this story. Again, I'm still picking Phoenix to win this series. I believe they'll win in 6 or 7 games. But the threat here for Dallas to overcome them is what if Luka starts making some of these shots? Because that's when things could get really, really dangerous. His ability to consistently make you pay for sending double teams, but to victimize mismatches makes him such a huge problem. And I'll use an example, a stretch of the game there in that third quarter when he was attacking Cam Payne. So Cam Payne had a really rough night tonight. He's actually a pretty decent backup point guard, but Dallas has been really good sliding their feet and containing dribble drive guys this entire season, and they've been putting him in a bind. Chris Paul's foul trouble obviously was an issue. We'll get to that in a little bit. But when you play guys on the floor that are small, like Cam Payne is, you just know that Luka's going to go after him. You know that Luka's going to make a concerted effort to make you pay for having a player like that on the floor. And what was super interesting is no matter where they had him, even if it was in like their weird kind of like little matchup zone that Phoenix was doing, Luka would just bring the ball over to where Cam Payne was there and then attack him. And he's so good, like Cam Payne was pressuring up on him, but Luka almost has like that Nikola Jokic-esque spin move where I always talk about how post players, one of the biggest things we train them to do, we do this with high school kids with the pad, the pad that you hold. You want to kind of err on one side of the body because most post defenders do something like that, especially when they're trying to front before the post entry, but they spin off on the other side. You're supposed to feel where the defender is and spin to that side. It's kind of like a license to use your chicken wing too. Like when you spin, you can use your shoulder and elbow to create more separation. And Luka was just doing that time and time again. If Cam Payne stayed behind him, he'd back him down and get into his post moves. If he would press up, he'd spin off of him and go all the way to the rim. And then and Luka has a gift for this with the pump fake, but what he would do is they'd put a good shooter, one pass away. Like Dorian Finney-Smith was incredible tonight. I believe he made 8 3-point shots. They'd put Dorian Finney-Smith one pass away, and Luka would kind of back down Cam and then just go up with the pump fake, and then out of the pump fake immediately make the pass, because on that shot fake, the guy guarding Dorian Finney-Smith would come over to help. And it was like the best way to catch him in between that stunt. We call that stunt doubling. If you don't want to actually give up an open shot, but you want to dissuade the offensive player from feeling comfortable, you lunge at him and then come back, right? Well, Luka was catching them in the lunge to get to open shooters. It's all just part of what makes him such a dynamic half-court surgeon the way that he is. It's one of the biggest reasons why I value Luka's skill set so much compared to some of his peers around the leagues. Obviously, his defensive issues are going to have to be addressed, although he's been a lot better defensively in the last 2 games. Dallas in general has been way better defensively in the last 2 games. That's the reason why they've been as successful as they are. We've talked about this at length on the show. Avoiding Phoenix's set defense, getting cross matches in transition so that you don't have to attack Mikal Bridges every time. Everything about what Dallas does is predicated on what they do on the defensive end of the floor. And, one of the things that they've been doing, it almost kind of reminds me of the Utah Jazz series. They're doing a good job of making it so that they don't give up too much in switches to DeAndre Ayton by crowding him, by stunting. All year long, Dallas has been a gimmicky defense in the sense that, they know they don't have the personnel. They don't have Phoenix Suns personnel. They don't have Boston Celtics personnel. They don't have 6 wings on the roster that can guard multiple positions. That's not what they're working with. They have a handful of really good players. Reggie Bullock and Dorian Finney-Smith are fantastic two-way players. They were 10 for 17 from 3 tonight, too, between the two of them, which is awesome. Those two guys are obviously your stereotypical, traditional, great defensive players. Reggie Bullock can do lock and trail stuff, so he's great to put on guys that run off of screens for shots, right? He's also Bullock is very good with ball pressure and being disruptive. And then Dorian Smith he's not quite the level of a Mikal Bridges, but he's a similar archetype of player. Super long wing with super long arms that bothers really good players. I remember watching Dorian Finney-Smith back in like 2017 or 2018 do a number on LeBron James in a game in Dallas. And I was like, man, this guy has physical tools at the wing position defensively that are just really, really difficult to deal with. But Dallas, outside of those two guys, has a lot of offensive-minded players. And Jason Kidd has just done a really nice job of talking them into committing to the defensive end of the floor and bringing it on that side of the floor and competing. And they've stifled a really, really good Phoenix Suns defense in the last couple of games. A lot of, after the first quarter, we saw Monty Williams talk about this, and this is something that I hit on heavy last night in the show. If you guys remember, dribble contain. I did this whole thing talking about how Memphis has a huge weakness with dribble contain and how it's one of the most valuable skills in the NBA right now. Well, one of the things that's been really hurting Phoenix in these two games is they're giving up easy dribble drives. If you guys remember that opening quarter interview, after the first quarter, they're interviewing Monty Williams, and he specifically talked about, we have to do a better job of keeping the ball handler in front, because when we don't, we have to help too much. That's when they get out to shooters. And I think the Mavericks made 14 threes in the first half or something crazy like that, compared to, I think Phoenix had only made 5. So like, massive advantage in the three-point shooting element of the game just because they were getting dribble penetration. And that's where Phoenix, and this is part of the dynamic of going on the road versus at home. Dribble drive defense is so much about just sitting in a defensive stance and moving your feet. And when you're feeding off the energy of the home crowd, it's just easier to do that. And Phoenix is running into the classic problem that happens when you go on the road. You still have to compete defensively the same way you did at home. There were stretches at home where it looked like Dallas was helpless against their defense, especially late third, early fourth quarter of game 2. They have to find a way to recapture that. I believe they will when they get home. The last thing I wanted to touch on from this particular game was the Chris Paul foul trouble thing. And, for a player in Chris Paul who's famous, like his reputation is smart decision maker, the adult in the room, the guy that you can trust to have the ball in his hands. And we're coming on a couple of really weird games here. 7 turnovers in game 3, then the foul trouble today. We'll talk about the foul trouble in just a second. But, with Chris Paul's playoff resume, there's some weird stuff like this. Like all the decisions at the end of that crazy Oklahoma City game that he tricked off and may or may not have tricked off the series. He has, there was that weird moment in the bubble in game 7 where he was scoring in switches over Robert Covington time and time again. And then on the last possession, he panicked and threw the ball to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and almost turned it over. And you're just like, it's so strange for a player who's typically so dependable in these situations to have some black marks on his resume in the playoffs. And it's just confusing because there's no excuse for the decisions that he was making today. Do I love that 6th foul? No. Yeah, technically on the offensive rebound, he kind of reached in on Jalen Brunson, but I thought it was a really, really weak foul in a playoff setting. But at the same time, that there are 2 different kinds of scenarios that take place on a basketball court. Scenarios where you take the whistle out of the equation entirely, or scenarios where you make the ref make a judgment call. The second you decide to reach in and hit him on the arm like that, you have now put the ref in a predicament. He now either has to blow the whistle and call a foul on you to foul you out of the game, or he has to ignore you hitting an offensive player on the arm while he's shooting. I'll give you an example. Luka Doncic, middle of the second quarter, I believe. He already had 2 fouls, I think, at this point, and he was trying to avoid his 3rd foul. Devin Booker's isolating him on the right wing. It's clear that Devin Booker is going to try to attack the rim on Luka with the sole intent to either get a wide open layup because Luka will give him the layup because he's in foul trouble, or to try to draw that additional foul on Luka. So what does Luka do? He looks over at the refs, shows him his hands, puts his hands behind his back. On that possession, he didn't keep his hands behind his back the whole time, but he was making a statement to the ref. I am not going to reach. Keep that in mind. Don't call a foul on me. Then Devin Booker did a hard dribble drive to the left, and Luka slid with him, took the drive in the chest, and fell over and drew an offensive foul. He is now playing the psychological game with the ref. I know I'm in foul trouble. I know you're watching me. I know Devin's hunting me, looking for a foul. I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to foul him. And even though he might not even have had legal guarding position, like that offensive foul was a kind of a 50-50 call, right? But he was winning the psychological battle with the ref by showing his hands the way that he did. There was a time where the Lakers did this back in 2019 with Brandon Ingram and Kuzma and LeBron, when they did the same thing in a game against James Harden. The entire game, they're like looking at the refs and showing them their hands the whole time. It's the psychological game, right? Let's go back to Chris Paul's 5th foul. Okay, you have 4 fouls in its early second half. You know you only have 2 left. You get a stop and get a rebound. And you dribble up the floor, deliberately veer into Jalen Brunson's path and stop. And a collision happens and there's bodies all over the floor. Again, yes, you have a chance to draw a foul there, but you have put the referee in a predicament where he has to make a judgment call. You put him in a predicament where he has to decide, am I calling a foul on Jalen or am I calling a foul on Chris? And are you going to get that call sometimes? Yes. But you put yourself in that predicament. Had you done nothing and dribbled the ball up the floor, yes, you take away the potential reward of drawing a bullshit foul on Jalen Brunson. But you also take out the possibility of you picking up your 5th foul. That's poor decision making. I thought at least 5 of the 6 fouls against Chris Paul tonight were good calls. And even the 6th one, it was close. That's just poor judgment. He knows better. He's been in too many of these games to do that. And again, it's like, I trust Chris Paul. I think he's going to pull through. I think Phoenix will win this series. But like, it's really strange to have a player that's historically as dependable as Chris do reckless things like that in that type of setting. Just really, really strange. Again, Dallas has a chance. Never count out Luka. They absolutely can win this game, this series. Their defense has gotten considerably better. That's a huge thing, that if they can carry that with them to Phoenix, they have a real chance to win. Luka still hasn't shot well. That's their chance to steal Game 5 as Luka goes into Phoenix and shoots really well. But Phoenix is the better team. They have 2 of the last 3 games at home. The smart money is still on Phoenix at this point.